Hi everyone, this is Melanie Eisen, the Assistant Director of Professional Development at the YU School Partnership. The next 2 weeks we're going to be looking at differentiated instruction, but we're going to be focusing on the classroom culture. It's been come to my attention that DI is working and you are trying a lot of the techniques and the tools and see the benefit of it academically, but socially it can have an effect on your classroom as kids start to see that maybe they are always put in the same group, maybe the kids who seem to be at a higher level are getting more challenging work than those who are at a lower level in terms of their learning readiness. And so this can have a negative effect on your classroom, especially if you find yourself grouping your kids more often than not according to their abilities, which is very much what happens in a classroom. So for this week, I thought we would focus on two areas, one on the habits of the mind and the other on creating a classroom culture, positive classroom culture using the habits of the mind, and the other using some techniques from the responsive classroom movement. I am a huge proponent of responsive classroom and the middle school piece as well. But I'm just sharing with you some of the techniques. I'm not trying to say go out and take a workshop on responsive classrooms. So just humor me with this piece because I feel that when I was teaching, it really helped me to create a culture where we became a community. And although I maintained my role, obviously, as the teacher and the leader, the kids took on a more active role in the way the classroom functioned. And I found that because of that, discipline problems and social issues became less of an issue in the classroom. So the difference between school and life: in school you're taught a lesson and then given a test, and in life you're given a test that teaches you a lesson. So one piece that I've looked at over and over again and saw as I was learning more about habits of the mind was when we think about our roles as teachers, especially in today's day and age, what are we preparing our kids for? Are we preparing them for a lifetime of tests, or the test of life? And I would like to say that we're doing a little bit of both. That in order to know where our students are, we need to always be assessing them. And sometimes these assessments are more rigorous in nature, and sometimes they are more reflective in nature, but we are constantly assessing them. But the other piece that we have to always keep in the back of our minds is we are teaching our kids how to be a part of a global citizenship world. It's very important that with all of the technology that is at the kids' fingertips, we don't forget to teach them how to be people. And I think when you bring that piece into the classroom, when you take a small amount of time each day to devote to getting to know your students, to them getting to know you, to working together away from the academics for a little bit, will help to develop a culture that is a culture of acceptance in your classroom. So just like I said, are we preparing the kids for a life of tests or the test of life? And as we send them out, they all have their devices, that's for sure, but are we also teaching them how to look at each other in the eye, how to focus, how to pay attention to what other people are saying, how to communicate with others, how to be respectful to each other, how to be active listeners to each other? I know in my own home, my sons don't talk to each other, they text each other. And they text their friends. And communication looks much different now than it did when I was their age. But I try to always reinforce in the importance of putting the technology away and actually having conversations with people to get to know them. Because if you're going to reach out across the globe, you have to have those social skills as well. The habits of the mind are ideas that have been floating around about we all know about these 21st century skills, but what other skills are our kids going to need in the future, and do we need to help teach them in order to be mensches, in order to survive in the world outside of our classroom walls, and in order to create a culture within our classroom walls that will help them to learn from each other and not always be pointing the fingers and creating rifts between learning groups. So if you look at these: persistence, managing impulsivity, listening with understanding and empathy, thinking flexibly, thinking about your thinking, striving for accuracy, questioning and problem posing, applying past knowledge, thinking and communicating, gathering data through all the senses, creating, imagining, and innovating, responding with wonderment and awe, taking responsible risks, finding humor, thinking interdependently, remaining open to continuous learning. All of these we want to have in ourselves, we want to have in our own children, and we want to see in our classrooms. But it's a lot to take in. So over the next couple weeks, I'm going to ask you to think about these. I'm going to give you some readings to look at and to think about, if I asked you to find 2 or 3 of these habits of the mind that you felt, if you brought them in some way or another into your classroom, if you put up posters of these words, if you practiced and modeled using these habits of the mind in your classroom, how would it affect the atmosphere in your classroom? How might the culture change if you thought about listening with understanding and empathy, and then you had the idea that kids were starting to complain about the work level they had, or that one has it easier, or that one doesn't. If you trained them how to listen with understanding and empathy, if you trained them to be creative, if you trained them to respond with wonderment and awe, if you help them to find humor in things, might those negative feelings be abated for a while? They're never going to disappear, but could you redirect that energy into the work that they're doing? Could you, as a teacher, think about these habits of the mind as you create these activities for the kids? Think about what you're asking them to do. Think about how you're presenting it to them. Think about how you group your students to make sure that you are honoring who they are as students and who they are as members of your classroom, and making sure to change the way they're grouped every so often to make sure that they don't always feel that they're getting less work or more work or too much work. One of the pieces of responsive classroom that I absolutely adore is the idea of a morning message and a morning meeting. This is an example of what a morning message could be. Imagine if you walked into the classroom and this was the first thing you saw: "Good morning, fabulous students." I smile when I look at it because it's an acknowledgement. Yes, it's kind of cliche, and yes, it's kind of silly, but I've seen it work with all age groups. I did it with my kindergartners, and they loved it, and I've seen it work all the way through middle school. That acknowledgement of who they are, they take a little smile in their face. If this is the first thing that greets them in the morning, I have a colleague who puts it on the outside of her door before the kids walk in. They read this. So they come in and they take a breath. Yesterday we had a productive day in Reader's Workshop. We were all busy reading and interacting with our texts. As you read today, I want you to think about how the actions of one character affect another character in the story. Sincerely, Mrs. Johnson. This sets the tone for the day. This sets the tone, gets them going, gets their juices going. This is what we're going to do today. I've done it in Hebrew. I've done it in English. I've seen the beauty of what a morning message and then a morning meeting can do. It doesn't take a long time to get this done, but it sets the tone. This is an example of what Responsive Classroom calls CPR, which is their version of the morning meeting. They're critical and they're empowering, and they're ways for kids to start the day together. What you see right now is a photograph of a middle school classroom or even a high school classroom where they are having an Energizer activity. An Energizer activity is an activity that has absolutely nothing to do with what the topic of the day might be, but gets the juices flowing, helps them get their day started on the right foot. I have selected different videos for you to watch, and you can pick 2 or 3 of them if you want to get an idea of what this might look like in your classroom. Again, it's forming classroom community, it's forming classroom culture. When you think of what you want your kids to be able to do today, when they leave your classroom, when they graduate from your grade level to the next, this is what we want them to have. But that is a lot for a kid to handle. These kids are under so much stress that they need an outlet for it. So when we pay attention to their social and emotional side, when we are listeners, when we come over to them and help them to learn how to be a mensch in the classroom, what it is to be an active listener, what it is to have grit, what it is to have persistence, we're helping them to help each other to become global citizens. Now, if you bear with me, I'm going to pull up one last thing to ponder. I want you to watch this YouTube with me, and after the YouTube is done, this Learn section will be over, but I want you to think about what he says.
If I could change one thing in education, it would be making explicit the now implicit understanding that the emotional atmosphere of the classroom matters. It's not irrelevant. In fact, it's essential to learning. And the reason it's essential to learning from a scientific point of view is that the emotional centers of the brain actually can take over the centers for learning. And so our attention goes from what the teacher is saying to that thing that's upsetting us. And the failure to understand this, I think, handicaps education as a system. So if we were to make explicit the fact that, yes, it matters that students feel safe, it matters that students feel calm, it matters that they're attentive, and they won't be attentive unless they're calm. And now that we're ready to learn, we can go ahead.